Hello, everybody. Welcome back to 1,000 Conversations About Our Future Power Lunch series, where we talk about all things Green New Deal, all things geek, all things nerd, and we're back again to do that for another week. Today, I am not only your lovely, and charming host, sustainability planner at the City of Ithaca, I am also humble co-conversationalist, I guess, here with Dr. Luis Aguirre-Torres, Director of Sustainability for the City of Ithaca. We also have the brilliant Lariah on the YouTube chat. So if you have any questions, comments, Lariah will capture those and funnel them to us, and we will do our best to answer any and all questions that you have. If we don't get to them today, then we will do our best also to follow up afterwards. But today we're talking about none other than the Green New Deal and sort of an update of what's going on, what's happened in the past year. And we'll give you a little update, give you some time for questions, and just sort of chat about what we've got going on and how little Luis and I sleep on a weekly basis. So hi, Luis. Welcome
Hello,
back
Rebecca.
to
Thank you very
everyone's
much.
favorite Tuesday live stream.
Yeah, right. No, I'm happy to be here as always. It's always fun to do these things, especially with you.
Ah,
And
shucks.
I've been looking forward to give people an update on what we're doing. The Ithaca Green New Deal has made so much progress from the very beginning, so it's kind of nice to be here. But how was your weekend? Your weekend was cool.
Oh gosh, now I'm like totally blanking on what I even did this weekend. I played a lot of video games. Cool, using up a lot of energy to do that. So really kind of the poster child for sustainability right now. What about you? Did you and Courtney do anything fun?
We actually didn't do anything. It was one of
I
those
love that.
weekends where you just don't do anything at all. And I did some work. I can't help it, but in general, it was a good one. And I was not expecting snow today. And I saw it over the weekend. I was like, this is not happening. But this is Ithaca, God.
Yeah, welcome to Ithaca. This is your first winter, right? Your first full winter?
First full winter, yeah, I know. I know I miss Mexico
Hmm.
sometimes. Not very often, but today, the days like today make me think like, man, I should be on the beach. But
Yeah, middle of April snow is always a treat.
yeah, but hey, let's talk about the Green New Deal.
Yeah, that.
The other day we were in this webinar. I don't know if anybody saw it, but by the way, we were in this webinar together, and it was awesome. It was a lot of fun because Rebecca and I work together all the time. We do a number of things together. But then, that was the first time that we were actually, sitting, chilling, and talking about the work we do. But it came entirely from the heart. It was not trying to impress. It was not trying to sell. It was just talking about, what drives us and how we ended up here. And I thought it was fantastic, Rebecca. I really, really thought that I learned so much from you that day, and we don't give each other the opportunity to do that, to have that kind of exchange and learn from each other. So I want to retake some of that magic, because I honestly thought the way you started the conversation was fantastic. You started talking about how it all happened, because I came in when the Green New Deal was a thing, and my job was to run with it. But before it was a thing, there was the interest of it becoming a thing, and I think partially it's your fault. So I don't know if you want to tell people about it, what your role was, and in general, tell the story of how it happened.
Sure. Yeah, it's my fault. That's a heavy burden to carry. Yeah, so it's about 2.5 years ago, I guess. I was working at Ithaca College in their sustainability office and was managing a team of climate rascals, undergraduate students, that were frustrated and angry about the climate crisis and really wanted the college to take more action. At the time, we had a carbon neutrality date of 2050, which has since been expedited to 2030. And I think in large part to some of the things that have happened locally, including the Green New Deal. So this group of students came to me and was like, what can we do to get the college to move more? And we started talking and thinking like, okay, the college is like pretty small potatoes compared to, the world and the problem that we're actually dealing with. Is there a way for us to think about this a little bit differently and scale it a little bit bigger? How do we maximize our impact given the fact that we have this group of students that have seemingly endless energy around climate change? And so we thought, maybe it's the city. It's just, or do we dare talk to people in the city? And of course, there was a whole learning curve learning about, who's in charge of what at the city and who has the ability to make change and all this sort of stuff. So we started meeting at bars and in restaurants and just like turning this thing over in our minds over and over and over again, and ultimately came up with a plan to hold an interest meeting with a bunch of college students and have them write letters to the mayor of Ithaca, Svante Myrick at the time. So we ended up with like a huge stack of letters that, like, even some of the information in those letters was wildly inaccurate. Like, all of them claimed to be constituent, which, if Ithaca College is in the town of Ithaca, we're talking to the city of Ithaca. So whether or not Mayor Myrick was just being kind and not mentioning that, I'm not sure. But ultimately, we delivered these letters to the mayor. And I actually learned this recently from a colleague that used to work for the city and now works for the town. I guess the mayor went into a meeting with him and was like, this Green New Deal thing, we should just do it. And Nick Goldsmith is kind of like, we've been pushing for something like this for a long time. Like, what the heck? How is this changing? And we ended up holding this, having a couple of closed door meetings with the mayor, and the students organized this big town hall around the Green New Deal. It was happening all over the country with the Sunrise Movement, basically saying, what is a federal Green New Deal? What does it mean? What are the opportunities? And it was like 2 hours long, painfully long. It was in the public library downtown, and it was just packed, standing room only, people standing out in the halls. It was an amazing turnout. And 2 hours later, the mayor waltzes in and says, oh yeah, by the way, carbon neutrality by 2030, social justice, Green New Deal, see you there. And then like 2 months later, the mayor, I think, introduces a resolution to Common Council. And again, that meeting in Common Council chambers was just packed with students and like young faces that you typically do not see in those meetings, advocating for the Green New Deal. And some of our allies that have been in this work for a long time also showed up. And we're like halfway through the meeting, Common Council is basically like, okay, we're hearing the same thing over and over again. Please, God, we all want the Green New Deal. Just stop talking. And it passed unanimously. And now here we are with this crazy new vision of transformative change in the city of Ithaca, thanks to you. We'll blame that part on you.
It is pretty awesome. And it's just, if you really think about anything that has changed the world, like not everything happens, as originally thought or by design. A lot of the time it's a series of unfortunate accidents, or fortunate accidents really. And very often it is just, having an idea, a very clear idea where you want to go, not really knowing what the road will be, but at the same time thinking like, we can do this, and a lot of people agree with me, and then we can probably produce change together. I've been in countries, in places where there's a ton of people wanting to produce change, but it's very difficult because the conditions are just not right, and the government would never support something like that. So I think there's a lot of merit in doing what you did, but there's a ton of merit in thinking globally, in thinking we can start here, but eventually this is a movement that has to go much farther than this. And also a lot of merit in realizing that what you had at your disposal, the power of people wanting to change things. And I don't think Major Myrick, for example, thought like, okay, I'll just do whatever they want. I think he thought about it, and eventually was like, yeah, I mean, they're right, they make sense. So it must have been a good moment. No, I mean, do you remember when you heard that, what you felt?
I knew it was going to happen before that meeting at the public library, and but yeah, I mean, I don't think that any of us really imagined what that even meant. People joke all the time, like, do we know what we got ourselves into? And the short answer is absolutely not. We had an idea of where we would end up with no appreciation of how to get there, like zero appreciation. It was really sort of this envisioning of a utopia that really doesn't exist anywhere. And, can we create that for ourselves? And that was the hope behind it. But I remember when Mayor Myrick announced it at the library, like, I knew it was going to happen. And like, I feel like, my throat closing up and my eyes are starting to burn. I was like, oh no, I'm going to cry. This is so embarrassing. I'm around so many colleagues. And I wasn't the only one. It was like very, very emotional. People were like clapping and like cheering. It was so humbling to see something like that go from a couple of college students just wondering what can we do to 100 people all being so emotional around the same thing. And you could reach out and grab hope out of the air and like stuff it in your pockets for later. It was really, really beautiful. And I wish we had it on video, because it was really, really amazing.
Well, I mean, it's gonna be one of the best memories that you're gonna take with you forever, I think.
One
I
of
mean,
them.
it's really hard, man. I mean, it truly is difficult to do this, to produce change at the scale that we want to do it. And it does require a ton of work. It requires a lot of adjustments along the way. And it requires people to get really behind this, not partially, committed, completely, fully behind this thing. And
Hmm.
there is a lot of respect to all of you that made this possible. And, you got me my job. So that's kind of a cool thing, too.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're forever indebted to us. So we talk about, transformation. We throw transformative change, that phrase, around a lot. And I think it means different things to different people. And I think it can be really scary in some ways. I mean, change is one, inevitable, but that doesn't mean it's any less fear inducing. I know that when we talk about really massive changes to anything, hands get a little sweaty, get a little nervous. How is this going to impact me? So I'm curious, when you think about the Green New Deal and where we want to end up, and not necessarily the process to get us there, like, how do you envision this transformation? What is even changing?
That is a really good point. Let me tell you how I see the Green New Deal, because this is, it is a funny thing because it really isn't sunrise movement anymore. It's not the government anymore. It is truly an unstoppable movement that got going in Ithaca, but it's gonna get everywhere. And so we need to think about it very differently. And I always use these phrases, but I really mean it. When you think about the Green New Deal, it is something really hard. We're trying to do something that nobody has attempted before, and it is one of those mission-oriented projects. Like the landing on the moon, like developing a vaccine in 6 months. We are promoting something that will change humanity, and you know what Mariana Mazzucato, the economist, says a lot is forget about the landing on the moon. It is everything that we need to do to make it there. So it's not that you're enjoying the road to the transformation that you want. It's mostly that along the way you need to build the pieces, bring together everything that needs to happen, and by virtue of that you cannot do it alone. So it becomes not only a mission oriented but a collaborative approach with the community. But to work with the community as government, as citizens, you need to reshape that relationship. Now that's what we refer to as the social contract. We need to really change the way we perceive each other. Because I'm not a prick that works for government, or I'm not a saint that runs the Green New Deal. I'm just a dude that wants a better world similar to a ton of people. So, but we need to re-understand, what is it that we're doing together. And when you think about it, what you and I have in common is this idea, and it's this connection that we have, and these values and connections to other people. So at the end, that is, representative of the social capital. That is representative of something that we need to hold here, because without it, it's impossible to do anything at all. And fortunately, one of those key values that you and I share is that we believe in a world where equity is at the very center of everything. No, I mean, we cannot think about it without justice. We cannot think about it without a real change towards really sharing, ample abundance, what we call sustainable prosperity. And if we were able to do that, like the transformation is not about the infrastructure, it's not about legislation, it's not about anything, it's about mobilization, it's about elevating social capital. And that mobilization should be a force that definitely could start with civil society and the government, but eventually we need every single person and every sector involved in this. And I really think that if we are redefining the rules of engagement, that means we're redefining the economy for the entire city. and we're not the only ones. So that is a good thing because this is part of a global effort to transform everything. But if you think about it, the Green New Deal and everything that you need to do to put it all together, and if you think about what everybody else is doing, in their different pockets, you see that we're part of a global effort. We're part of something that cannot be done in isolation. We're talking about something that needs to have a comprehensive look at everything. It's not only about carbon emissions. It's not about social justice. It's about all of them. And so at the end of the day, it's a holistic approach where everybody has a say, like a model of shared governance. So at the end of the day, what the Ithaca Green New Deal represents is much more than ideal. It represents a transformation in the way we think, we relate to each other, we perceive the value that everybody brings to the table, and we redefine, the rules of engagement. So every time I talk about this, on one hand I get emotional because I really think it's one of those things that are terribly important. But on the other, like I realize that technology, money, all of those things are going to come into play. But at the end of the day, we need to buy into the idea that this transformation is necessary, but most importantly, it's possible. And we can get into the details, about what that actually means physically, if you want. But I don't know. What do you think?
No, yeah, I love that. I mean, when we think about sustainability, it's really about relationships between systems. And I think that's the transformation that we're really making, is redefining those relationships. And, for some, that means first acknowledging those relationships, right? Like the connection between justice and climate change and infrastructure. But I think, the thing that really stuck with me with what you were saying, was that this has never been done before. So, on one hand, we can think of this as really scary and like a huge opportunity for failure, which, like, love that risk. But also, this is an opportunity to be involved with and make world history. I mean, this is incredibly aggressive, incredibly aspirational, and the scary part is that we can't do it alone, but that's also the really inspiring part, I think. And especially around, carbon neutrality, there are a lot of ways to reach carbon neutrality. But the approach I think that we're taking is indeed this sort of transformational effort that goes way beyond how most people think about carbon neutrality. We're talking about eliminating carbon emissions rather than neutralizing carbon emissions. So maybe this is a good time to take a look at sort of the game plan and the different scenarios that we're talking about with carbon neutrality and with the Green New Deal.
Sure. Let me use this as a very forced segue into sharing some slides that we have, because I don't know. I mean, I hope people are watching, and if not, they will watch it later. But take a look at what we're working on, and I think this is kind of cool. So we could do nothing, like absolutely nothing about this, and even we could stop efforts, and emissions will increase, and the problem will be bigger, and it will be unsolvable, and it would be impossible to stop the momentum towards literally the end of the world. But we can help people that are working in this direction. We can help some of those that are already doing it, that people that willingly are trying to electrify their homes, people that are stop using the car and start riding a bike. We could actually put the weight of government behind, and we can say, like, what, we're going to have a program to make the transit system probably even free for some or for everybody. We could actually create programs that will allow you to electrify your water heater, perhaps change your kitchen and make it full electric. We can facilitate the deployment of solar technology or even energy storage that is more affordable today. We can even try harder. We can even put some money towards this. We can have not only the planning department in the city government, but having every department, including Department of Public Works, for example, working on this. And eventually we could change the way we perceive waste. We could have electric garbage trucks. We could do things. But if we really want the dream, we need to go for 100%. And we're talking about everything, leaf blowers, lawnmowers. We're talking about clothes dryers, electric bike share systems. We're talking about a circular economy. We're even talking about not producing any more organic waste in the city and turn this into biochar. We're talking about carbon sequestration, and capture. So it's a number of things. And this all may seem too technical, but if you look at what's on the screen, it's everything that we know and we see every day. It's just a little bit of let's change how we do this. And your job and mine is to figure this out in terms of how we pay for it, how we get it to the community. But on one, if you think about it, it's overwhelming. But if you look at it, it is quite possible, and that's quite kind of fun. Uh, I want to share how we got to this plan just very quickly, and it is we started, yeah, thank you, Rebecca, you managed to get a director of sustainability hire, which we began working on the Ithaca Green New Deal, and eventually we decided, okay, we have enough, so we can have a plan moving forward. And at the same time, Nick Goldsmith, that did a wonderful job for several years running the sustainability office in the city, and he managed to complete this was first in New York. New York City announced it in December, but Nick managed to get this thing in June last year. Where we were saying, like, 2026 natural gas is going to be banned in the city of Ithaca for any new construction, and that energy code is unique, and it deserves much more attention than what it got, to be honest. Then in June, I remember last year, on June 24th, the mayor was presenting before the United Nations the Ithaca Green New Deal. It was one of those moments that you were like, oh my God, like we're actually talking to the UN about the plan that we have, and that was fantastic. But through those relationships, we managed to contact some investors, and we managed to raise money, because this is not cheap. But we always thought this is not impossible. It's about having the right connections, and through the UN and others, we managed to make these connections. And I remember that's when you and I started working together more closely, and we developed these 1,000 conversations about the future project, which has us working together here today talking about this. But then in August, I remember we launched, and this was the first time. And I remember I was so nervous when I pressed publish, because we had an RFP. We have a request for proposals for something that nobody had ever done before, and we were hoping that it was right, that it was clear. I wasn't sure anybody was going to respond to it. While people responded, we were working, okay, we need to think about how we bring more renewable energy to the city, and how we need to perhaps develop a solar project within city boundaries. But then November came, and when November came, we got all the answers from the RFP, and then we got the city council voting unanimously to do something that nobody had ever done before, like ever, anywhere. And it got so much attention, and deservedly so, because the truth is we're trying to do something so hard, so difficult, and it was just it was one of those moments like you were describing. I remember when the vote happened, I was about to cry, because it was like I couldn't believe that this was happening. And then that just led to many more things and more relationships. And then 2022 came, and we had not been on the job for 12 months. We had been doing this for 9 months only. And then we continue working towards this, because the attention that we got in November made it all the way to the White House. And then suddenly the White House had this National Building Performance Coalition, and Ithaca is it's the smallest city that is part of this coalition, and we are leading the charge. Just think about that. It's 30,000 people. We are leading the entire country on this, and that is just one of those amazing things. We also joined the UN, because everything that we're doing, and you and I have talked about this. Like if we continue doing recs, if we continue doing offsets, we're never gonna really get rid of emissions. We don't want to neutralize them. We want to get rid of them. So making a commitment to find a way of procuring 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, carbon-free electricity for the city. That is the challenge, but we took on it, because we joined the 24/7 Energy Compact with the United Nations. And in February, because when we thought about it, this is kind of the awesome thing, because what we're doing in sustainability really leads to job creation. It is a wonderful tool for economic development, and just through this, we're going to create like 3,000 jobs in the long run. Once again, think about it: 30,000 people, we're going to create 3,000 jobs. Like, this is crazy. This is a model for the entire country. And we had to partner with a number of people and to create the Green Jobs Corridor, and we did that in February. And I think what the celebration here is how we managed to bring people together, and how we managed to bring even the utility company to see that this is real and we need their help. And they have been the villains for so long, but this time they actually came to the table and they were like, okay, let's do this thing together. We can work together. And thanks to you, by the way, the EPA, again, We consider Ithaca a green power partner, and also we were selected for Lead for Cities by Bank of America. And I think this is just the beginning of a number of things, because right now we are getting into the really complicated thing. We're going to be talking about climate justice. We're going to be talking about stuff that is, I know, very dear to your heart, Rebecca. And I'm going to stop talking very soon and ask you to probably elaborate on that. But we're going to start the hard work, because we're going to have to make sure that all of this transformation, even if we are to electrify every single vehicle and we were to deploy charging stations, equity and climate justice has to remain at the very core of this, because otherwise we're never going to change things. And even if we were to sequester all the emissions from the wastewater treatment plant and installing a biochar system through pyrolysis, if we were to have a curbside pickup of organic waste, all of those things that we are planning to do need to be done with equity in mind. And for that, we're already working with INHS, trying to electrify one of the most symbolic buildings that we have in the city. And if we get away with this, it's going to be the most advanced building in the entire city, perhaps in the entire region, and it has to fill you with pride. And we're looking at hydrogen and a number of other things. And I really think that the work that we've been doing is very little compared to the work that is coming. But I really think that we're right there, And so I said that I was going to use this as another forced segue to bring it back to you. But I really want your opinion in terms of, are we doing the right thing? Because this is all tech, this is all money, this is all politics and policy. But what about people? What about climate justice? And do you want to give us now your take of the Green New Deal, but from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Green New Deal was started by community members, right? It was this crazy idea from a super left politician in New York City, and college age students all over the country sort of latched onto it. And it was really amazing to see the number of people that were ready to back those students. So I think by nature, this is a people-oriented, a community-oriented project. A project seems like such a small word for such a big thing. But I think you're right. Everything that we do within the Green New Deal needs to be looked at through this lens of equity and justice and relationship building. I don't think that I am totally off base to say that we've eroded a lot of trust with the community. And I say the collective we as people in administrative or government positions. Too often, I think, and not just in the city of Ithaca, all over the country, we tell people this is what you need, and here you go. Here are the policies that make it happen, and God bless. But I think what we're trying to do here is actually flip that on its head entirely and think, can we have people tell us what they need, and then how do we make that happen? And that's the whole point of 1,000 Conversations, right? Is kind of reverse engineering of public policy. So this is one, method of communication for 1,000 Conversations, is us giving information to the community that I think in turn allows them to help make their decisions. They participate in the prompts for 1,000 Conversations, and then we can synthesize that feedback and form it into policy. So, this kind of communication loop that we have going on just with this one project, I think ensures that it's community driven. And I mentioned this to you before we got on this call. There's nothing more humbling than being a white woman trying to work in the equity space, because if there's one thing that I can't do, it's put myself in the shoes of people that have not been reaping the benefits of public policy in the past. And I can listen, and that is the best thing that I can do. But I constantly want to do more. I want to understand, and that's something that I will never be able to do. So that's very humbling. But I also think it gives me the privilege to be working on this and try and put those voices into action. But yeah, that's kind of a long and rambling answer to your question, but I see we do have some questions from the chat, and I want to go back. You showed that that graph that has sort of like business as usual and 25% cut. So we have a question from Reggie asking, do we find that people are more responsive or supportive as the news and weather make them more aware of the climate crisis? And I think that's a really good question, because I would argue that that graph that you showed, business as usual, I think is actually at that 25% at this point, especially in this region. The sort of household by household electrification, education about climate change is pretty readily available. It's on the news all the time, like Reggie mentioned. So, do I think people are more supportive or responsive? You know, I think it's just a culture shift that's happened in the past 5 to 7 years, especially. And I think, you know, 2020 especially was kind of a moment of reckoning for a lot of people that previously were not engaged in government. So I think, you know, talking about community again, I think that was sort of a reignition of anger and frustration in some ways, but also of inspiration to actually get involved. So yeah, I think we do have more support, but I think in Ithaca we've also always been very lucky to have a really active community that is very engaged in climate activism. What do you think? Do you think that we're getting more support? Sometimes it's hard to tell.
Sometimes it's hard. I mean, people know more about it, and people ask about it, and you know, it is true in our region. You don't need to explain everybody, you know, what a heat pump is, and that is
Right.
very unique to where we are, and that just means that people are better informed than in other places. But then if you separate this, you know, from those in a position of privilege that know what a heat pump is, and then you start talking to regular people that don't have time to think about this, people that go to work or go to school, come back, make dinner, put the kids to bed, and then eventually it's 10 p.m., you know, time to perhaps do home, catch up with work. And eventually they see the news, but they don't want to see this. They don't want to see polar bears dying or the Arctic melting. I mean, they really, you know, want to see other things. So, but then the question is, like, how is this supposed to affect people? I mean, is it supposed to give them nightmares? Because it does to me, you know. But I think that it is true. There is a lot of coverage, but at the same time, we have to get it into the fabric of our society. It has to be at the very core of everything that we do. You know, we need to have legislation that prevents people from doing certain things, but also that incentivizes people to do the right thing. We need to have, you know, school programs that tackle these dead on, you know, without any criticism, you know, like this is happening, we need to talk about it, and we need to engage people with this in mind. So there are a number of things. So I think the short answer is, yeah, definitely it's helping, but it's not getting where it has to go. And for that, we need to do a more explicit effort, you know. And you started saying just now that nothing more humbling than a white woman working on this. And I'm going to tell you a story, something that happened to me that I know we don't have time for this, but I'm going to take the time to tell you, because honestly, I was invited to this super cool event. You know, it was kind of the farewell party for President Obama. And you know, 9 of us that had worked with the administration were invited to give a 10-minute presentation of the work that we were doing. And the first person that walked to the stage started talking about Sandy Hook and how this person became an activist after his son died. And I was just shocked, no? And then this person came, and she happened to be a victim of human trafficking. And he was talking about how she created a foundation to fight that. And one after the next, they were talking about all of these things. And the person right before me came to the stage saying, you know, I don't have a lot of time to live because I have this illness that nobody is doing research about because we're very few. So I'm raising money for that. So what happened was that I started crying. You know, it was my moment to shine, but I was so moved by everything that I started crying, and I couldn't stop crying. So the person that was on the stage came down, and she held me. She just came and gave me a hug. And I was just thinking, like, dude, I talk about solar panels. But then this person was just hugging me and saying, like, dude, like, you are not a victim of this, you know, not in the same way. And still you are doing it, you know, like it has a lot of merit, you know, when you are willingly and happily devoting, you know, a huge amount of your time to the point that it becomes personal, to something that will benefit thousands of people. So I think there is nothing more humbling for me that somebody like you is willing to work on this. You know, I think at the end of the day, that's what we need. What we need, you know, we need people that really see this for what it is. It's an effort that needs everybody's help, but mostly those in a position of privilege, because everybody else is busy surviving and making it to the next day. So if we are in this position of privilege where I know, you know, I know how to live my life and I can have a happy life, but I know other people can't. That's enough reason to do what we do, no? So anyway, I want to add that because I really understand what you're saying, but you should be proud of everything that you do because of, you know, that woman was right.
Really nice. And thanks for turning this into an emotional power lunch, Luis. Really appreciate that. No, I was reading this article by a psychologist actually this morning, Lee Kravitz, I think is his name. And he was talking about the idea of grounded hope that helps us move forward, particularly he was in the context of youth climate activism, of, you know, really understanding what's at stake. And that's the grounded piece. We know the science, we don't need it pushed down our throats anymore. But empowering each other to still do something. Doesn't matter what that something is, but something. And always having that grounding of, this could go horribly wrong, but if we do nothing, then that's even worse. So that phrase of grounded hope really stuck with me this morning, and now I feel like it's kind of carrying over here.
Well,
That's
is.
what
It's what it has to be. No, I mean, at the end of the day, the road ahead is so much harder than what we have been doing. And yeah, you and I joke a lot about how many hours we actually don't sleep, and how much, you know, work it is, not only by us but a ton of people involved. But then the work ahead is just, it's just gonna be harder, but it's not gonna be less fun. It's not less important, you know, and there is more urgency. So I think in terms, like, trying to bring it back to the Green New Deal specifically, you know, wanting to give an update for people. Uh, the truth is, we are creating partnerships that we didn't have before, you know, with other governments and with sectors of society. We're engaging groups, representatives, truly representatives of disadvantaged communities. We are really engaging the academic institutions. We're engaging the utility company, all forms of government, county, state, federal, non-profits. It is truly an army right now that we have put together, you know, to help Ithaca pull this off. And I think what is coming, you know, we want to deploy more solar. You know, we want to deploy more solar in people's houses, businesses, whenever possible. You know, it's a voluntary thing, but if you want to, you know, we can help. We want to electrify homes because that's the main source of emissions. You know, we want to make sure that people start cooking with electric cooktops. People, you know, start drying their clothes with electric dryers, and you know, replace the furnace and the water heater with electric versions. But we want to save energy, so we want to help people retrofit their homes. We want to make sure that people travel less miles, you know, on single passenger vehicles. So we want to offer more options for, you know, bike share, or perhaps, you know, mopeds. And we want to also work with TICA to see if we can, you know, at some point manage to make the transit service free for everybody. So you have no excuse, you can use it. And we also want to make sure that we deploy as much EV charging infrastructure all over the place in the city. And we need to continue, you know, exploring alternatives like hydrogen, but not in the way some companies are using, no, not natural gas based, but like truly green hydrogen with zero emissions. And I believe all of that is within reach. You know, this year alone, we're gonna see a lot of that. So I think that's part of what is coming. And I don't know, what do you think? Do you think I'm missing something that we need to tell people that is coming?
No, I don't think we're necessarily missing anything, but you know, we talk about electrification a lot. That's sort of the flagship of the Green New Deal as it stands right now, and certainly the sexiest part of the Green New Deal that grabs a lot of attention. And we get this question a lot, and I imagine there's a question from Steve in the chat as well that I'm hoping we can roll into this. We get a question about grid capacity issues and electrifying all 6,000 buildings in the city, and then starting to work, you know, the town with their Green New Deal. That's another, what, 7,000 buildings. You know, when do we run into an issue of grid capacity? And then to Steve's question, The electricity that we are getting from the grid from NYSEG, exactly how clean even is that? Is that a move forward from natural gas? And once we do start to electrify on a larger scale, what does that mean for our utility supply? Are we still relying 100% on NYSEG? Is that the same as REX? I'm asking a lot of questions, so pick and choose your favorites.
We can answer all of them, I think, with a simple answer. One, yeah, the composition of the different forms of electricity generation that we have in New York State and the US in general, it has a number of technologies. It has nuclear, it has hydro, it has wind, it has solar, it has natural gas, dual fuel. There are many sources of electricity. And, in the state of New York, at the state level, about 55% come from carbon-free sources and 45% come from fossil fuels. We're in the process of removing those fossil fuel sources. Like there were great news this weekend from New York City about how we're managing, to make progress in that direction. But then if you look at the grid is divided really in the city. There are structures that you put in place to make sure that electricity, issues with electricity wouldn't cascade beyond certain regions. So there's really a separation between what people call downstate and upstate. Where we are actually one transmission line directly connected to a nuclear power plant and to a hydro power plant and to a lot of wind. So in Ithaca, we have about 80% carbon-free electricity. And I think I am legally required to say there is a high likelihood that the electricity that we get in Ithaca is 80% carbon-free. But then that 20% is what you need to replace. So you need to deploy more solar. You need to figure out how to deal with that, because as we electrify everything, there's going to be more need for electricity. And like the amount of energy that we use from natural gas is huge. So when you turn that into kilowatt hours into electricity, that increases the demand. So on one hand, you want the utility company to move away from fossil fuels, but we're a city that doesn't have a lot of, doesn't have any authority to really mandate any of those changes. That's at the governor's level and at the federal government level. So, what we can do is to procure electricity on behalf of the city. So we can do community choice aggregation. Community choice aggregation has this added advantage that it will provide equity. It will, right now, you and I may be able to bring, renewable energy, but, we pay for it. But some people don't have that choice. So there is an issue of equity when we talk about procuring electricity. So what if the city were to create a way through community choice aggregation for people to procure carbon-free electricity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? So it opens the door for an opportunity for us, as government to create this, for other people. And I think it's doable. And we are working with the utility company so closely that you wouldn't believe it. I know in the environmental movement, we're really used to calling them the evil ones. They kind of are, but not everybody. And some of the people working with the utility company are working with the city, and we are finding ways of making this possible. People need to be patient because we don't want to talk about it that way, but climate change is an economic issue. And therefore, there are economic considerations and financial considerations that need to be taken into account. Not understanding them should not lead to, invalidating them. So at the end of the day, we need to think about it more holistically.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, transforming relationships, and, our relationship with the utility, I think is one of those. But so you mentioned CCA, community choice aggregation, and we talked about REX a little bit in the beginning. And you're suggesting that CCA might be, a possible tool for us to increase the number of renewables or the percentage of renewable energy that we're actually consuming. So can you explain, briefly and perhaps thoroughly how CCA would differ from, say, if we were purchasing renewable energy from an ESCO? Like, why would we choose CCA instead?
Well, most essential services have oversight. We cannot just let a third party provide water supply to everybody. We need to make sure that the water is drinkable, right? I mean, at the end of the day, and electricity, come on, it's like one of the perhaps most important services that a city can provide, right? So community choice aggregation basically installs the municipality in the middle to oversight how a third party, a supplier of electricity, provides electricity to the community as a whole. So by creating this entity, and this entity would manage what the community in aggregation decides to procure from electricity, hence the community choice aggregation part. We can actually contract electricity service with companies that are providing it based on solar or wind technology or hydrogen or anything else, and we could actually identify those that are 100% carbon free and have a contract with them. The advantage that we have in New York State is that the utility company is not the owner of the generation at the same time as they own the transmission and distribution, and that separation allows us to still rely on NYSEG for transmission and distribution, but really go to other providers, whoever we choose, through a competitive process, and get energy from them. And that way we get renewable energy. We're able to supply electricity to everybody of every low income, any bracket really, and that makes it just fair for everybody.
Yeah, so going back to the community choice part, so say I'm a resident living in the city of, I am a resident living in the city of Ithaca. Do I get to participate in choosing who the electricity provider is, or is that something that the city would decide, or whoever the CCA administrator is would decide for me? Is there a participatory process at all?
Well, it is, again, the element of choice, so it is what is called an opt-out program. And what that means is once we get this, we get, a public comment and opinion, and we design this, we get the state government to approve it through the Public Service Commission, and we set it in motion. Then everybody has the right to stay with NYSEG with the current service, or to be part of community choice aggregation. So you, as a citizen, you would immediately be rolled into this, and suddenly your bill is going to be exactly the same, but the electricity that we're going to be billing you for is going to be clean. You actually maybe bill even less than what you're being billed today. So
Love that.
we might get lower bills, lower utility bills, cleaner electricity, but you still have the choice of going back to NYSEG. You don't like it. My advice would be don't do it. But if you want to do it, you are well within your rights, just like you are well within your rights of driving a pickup truck with diesel. No, it's just not what's recommended, because the world is kind of ending if we all decided to go that way. But you are within your rights to do that. I'm not trying to shame people into doing this. I'm just saying this is the reality. It's a matter of fact. So you can choose to stay in the community choice aggregation, or you could choose to not be part of it and continue the way you've been doing things.
Maybe we need to issue like AMAs against medical advice for people that opt out, against Luis's advice, though, an ALA. Zing, there's your zinger of the day. Okay, we'll wrap up in a minute, but we do have another question that we will answer first. Question from Sarah. ESCO I use charges quite a bit more for 100% renewable electric than NYSEG default price. How can you make the price under a CCA match the default price?
Yeah, well, one of them is volume. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're looking into. We're trying to get, as many people part of the community choice aggregation program, and then there will be a competitive process, an actual RFP. The difference is that right now it's a seller's market. So you have very little choice, in terms of, where you procure your electricity. And so you want renewable, you're going to get it from this company. I am very sure that most companies providing ESCO services are related to, for example, Constellation, that, sells kind of like 80% of the RECs around here. And they're in Texas, really. But anyway, let's say that you're buying from a community solar farm around the neighborhood, because of the way it is set up and because of the different regulatory structures, there is a minimum price that you will end up paying. But if you do community choice aggregation through a competitive process that is an RFP, and we go with the lowest bidder, we can guarantee in average in New York State, the average savings is between 15 and 20%. So we are hopeful that we can actually do the same thing for the city, especially if we eventually expand to the county. There is a chance that through volume alone, we can have a better price. That is the hope anyway.
Great. So we do have one more question, and it's from Steve. He says it's a weird question, but we're going to take it because Steve is a regular for our power lunches. So this is in the hopes that you will keep coming back, Steve. Steve asks, do you think Ithaca or Tompkins County would ever be open to citing something like a fission microreactor to give people a chance to understand that tech? And one of the other reasons that I want to hear your answer to this question, Luis, is 15 years ago when I was in undergrad, I actually was part of a debate team that talked about nuclear and whether or not nuclear was a safe or good idea. And this is 15 years ago when the conversation around nuclear was really, really different. So acknowledging that, nuclear technology has changed in the past 15 plus years. What do you think about citing something like that in Tompkins County? Assuming you could make that decision.
Assuming I could make that decision, which I can. But
unilaterally.
Yeah, you're talking to somebody who actually believes that nuclear is necessary. I fall on that side of the debate. I believe that the technology has progressed and is very safe today. I believe it is very efficient, and a lot of investment is going into making it more modular, smaller scale, that eventually may be the answer for a lot of places, because in Ithaca, in Iowa, you have a ton of wind, for example, but what about other states where your options are really limited? So I really believe that it is a technology that has in not a very long term really have a solution for urban centers. So I really think that it is an option that I would consider. The problem you have with everything else is that it's intermittent. So the solar relies on the sun shining, wind on the wind blowing. Hydro, this is climate change, and the volume of every hydro power plant is going down dramatically. The one Cornell has here has like a 10th production of what it had about 10 years ago. So you cannot rely on hydro. So you need to start looking at these options very seriously, but it doesn't mean that you don't do it in a responsible way. It is highly regulated. A lot of progress has been made, and investment is going in that direction. So I really think that that is a serious option. I don't know if it's going to be for us, but it is an option for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, we're married to hydrogen here in the city of Ithaca, I think. We've made that pretty clear.
we really like hydrogen.
Yeah.
And I think hydrogen is offers great possibilities. Right now, we haven't made it to the tipping point where we can actually say that we have parity, but at some point it's going to be cheap enough. At some point it's going to be possible to do this, and hydrogen opens the door for. It is just it depends. We need to think about energy. In terms of energy flow. How big the hose needs to be, and in energy density. How much of it we need and how much of it we can store. So right now, hydrogen and nuclear are the only ones that can produce a baseline with enough energy flow and enough energy density to satisfy the needs. So while we get there with any other technology, those are the only options. So it's worth investing in them.
It's so cool. I feel like we could talk about this all day. Anyway, so we are running out of time. We're actually running overtime. So thank you everybody for coming. But we do have one more question, my question, that's always off topic and a little bit zany. But for those that were and were not at the last Common Council meeting, Common Council dedicated the bridge to nowhere to Kirby Edmonds, who was a stalwart in this climate change and equity movement here in Tompkins County, really all over the place. He was very, very active. So in memory of Kirby and in solidarity with the dedication of the bridge to nowhere, one of the things that I always remember Kirby asking is whenever somebody would use the word community, he would ask, what community? Who is the community? And we use that word a lot. We talk about this being community driven and listening to the community. So I want to know, Luis, you've been here full time for just over a year. One, do you see yourself as part of the Ithaca community yet? Do you feel like it has been, have you been consumed by Ithacans?
I think I have. Despite some people that think differently, I do believe I belong in this community. I do believe that I am part of this. It is a wonderful place, honestly. It's the place where I chose to, come and retire, and I'm glad I did because I really think this is a wonderful place. It's difficult to understand, this community. It's really hard but people are welcoming and nice in general, and there is so much work that I just found a place here. But I've been here for a year, but you've been here not for much longer. How about you? Like, are you fully part of this community now?
I don't know. I'm probably not the person to ask. Yeah, I've been here for actually 5 years as of April 1st. So that's an anniversary for, I don't know what anniversary that is, paper, tin, something like that. I think I have found my nook. Am I part of all of the communities here? Absolutely not. There are definitely other communities that I would love to be a part of, but I'm not. So yeah, I think it's a never-ending process of, transforming relationships to bring this full circle. But yeah, I mean, definitely have our allies, and we definitely have a really excellent, we collectively, the Office of Sustainability, have a really great support system of totally crazy climate nerds, some of whom are on this call. So yeah, I think part of what we're doing is building community or rebuilding community so that we can connect those, different pockets of communities within the city, to make something really, really incredible out of the Green New Deal.
Awesome.
There you go.
Well, thank you very much, Rebecca. This was, again, a magical, wonderful conversation. I appreciate that.
Yes, and thank you everybody for joining us. We will be back next week, same time, same place. We'll be talking about transportation, so electric vehicles, electric buses, all of that fun stuff. You're not going to want to miss it. So join us again on Tuesday, the 26th at noon here on YouTube. And we will see you then. Everybody have an awesome week. Happy Earth Day on